Here's a tier list of every single track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. On with the video. If you've gone and played Mario Kart with anyone, you'd know that each person that is into the franchise has their own favorite title in the series. But what lies deeper in the conversation is that each game represents someone's ideal Mario Kart experience. As consistent of quality that Mario Kart has as a series, each game has had some rather drastic and unique changes to the gameplay that makes each of them stand out from one another. You may look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with its 96 tracks and expansive battle mode with the lens of it being the definitive Mario Kart. However, when you look at the franchise as a whole, it's mainly the best at fleshing out what it's trying to be, which is a massive Mario Kart title that anyone of any demographic can get into. In fact, I've talked to a number of people that flat out do not like Mario Kart 8, but get a kick out of previous games in the franchise, and there's actually a reason for that. Mario Kart hasn't been a franchise that simply improves on each new entry. There are entries that appeal as easy-to-understand pick-up-and-play racing titles, some that have far larger skill ceilings due to advanced mechanics, some that utilize braking and velocity for some insane shortcut potential, and that one that tries something that I never would have thought of. There's something about the Mario Kart series that fascinates me. On paper, you'd think each new entry would simply be an improvement or successor on what the previous game already did. Why play this one if the new one is even better? However, we're seeing that even to this day, with the brand new Mario Kart World being a complete shakeup from the rest of the games, that there is a reason to play and own each entry. Today, I want to explore each game to see how each one stands out from one another, and how there is, in fact, a Mario Kart for everyone. I'm honestly extremely curious to see what Nintendo fans thought of Super Mario Kart back then. Did people think that it was just some one-off Mario spin-off with fun, colorful elements from the main games? Did people know truly how much of a phenomenon this would become to where this spin-off franchise would become Nintendo's second best-selling game of all time? Super Mario Kart is quite the interesting game for the system it's on due to its impressive two-player split screen for a pseudo-3D title on a system that primarily does 2D games. If F-Zero was a powerhouse showcase of a racing title that puts accuracy and speed to the test, Super Mario Kart is far more of a wacky family experience where anything can happen. It's a fairly easy game to understand how to play, but it certainly takes time to become skilled at, especially if you're used to future Mario Kart games. Multiplayer chaos is at the core of the fun here, but Super Mario Kart requires a lot more strategy to fully get a grasp on, as you need to figure out what turns are best to simply steer on or use the drift early on to try to make a sharp turn on. In that sense, aside from the items spicing up the experience, Super Mario Kart feels the most like a traditional racing game out of any game in the series. A racer where you must combine sharp turns with necessary braking to make sure you're able to make each corner, while dodging an onslaught of obstacles and items, of course. While I can appreciate Super Mario Kart for what it is and what it established, it seems like a game I'd have no interest in returning to, on the surface at least. Then Mario Kart 64 comes along and isn't simply set on just bringing the series into full 3D. So many franchise staples were kept and established from this Mario Kart alone. Tracks here are way more fleshed out and given more depth, changing the lap count from 5 to 3 as a result. Each track has an impact that excels in iconography and design. They were also built with a new drift system in mind. Where in Super Mario Kart you'd make use of drifting as a cornering tool to make large turns, drifting in 64 will send you into a power spark status, and when you move the stick in specific sweet spots back and forth enough times, said spark will turn orange, and when you release, you'll perform a mini turbo boost accompanied by a voice sample to telegraph the successful boost. This addition alone made so many turns far more action-packed with more rapid movement required from the analog stick. With items like bananas and shells, you can now hold down the item button to hold them behind your vehicle to use as defense against most items. This added a new layer of strategy to using items, where you debate whether to use them to slip up other players or to protect yourself from items you can't avoid, like the red shell. This game also introduced the infamous blue shell, which has become a series staple item that makes a mad dash towards the player in first place. It's quite rare to see in this game, but it creates far more tension when you're in first place, since you never know when it will come and destroy any sense of flow you may have. Despite its status, it does help each race to not feel so one-sided. Mario Kart 64 is the game that really helped turn the series into a mainstay for Mario as a whole. Bringing the series into the third dimension and bringing further balance does go a long way for that, to be fair. Mario Kart Super Circuit makes a strive to modernize the kind of game that Super Mario Kart was and bring it onto the Game Boy Advance. It certainly looks a whole lot more polished, being in full screen for better visibility and having very stunning backgrounds. For the longest time, I did think that it was a successor to Super Mario Kart, but on a handheld, and it certainly is, especially when you consider the fact that it's the first Mario Kart game to bring back tracks from previous games. However, this game takes a lot more elements from Mario Kart 64 than I initially thought. The character sprites look nearly identical to their 64 counterparts, but they also retain some items introduced in 64 like the Boo and the Blue Shell, which I have only encountered once in my entire recording session. They also include being able to defend yourself with items, and even the mini turbo on the drift, which I didn't even know existed until watching speedruns of the game because it works completely differently than any other Mario Kart. Basically, you have to be drifting constantly for around a second, which is quite tricky to do, and then go straight for around half a second, and then you'll get a small boost. It's cool that it exists, but man, I'm horrible at executing it in the middle of a race in this title. Mario Kart Double Dash creates a new layer of chaos by being the only game to feature two characters on a single kart, allowing for far more items to be thrown on the track than ever before. Due to this, you can swap items you're using on the fly with the Z button, or you can swap to the other character and save that item for later, adding easily the most fun strategic element to item usage out of any game in the series. What's especially unique about items in this title is that this is the only game in Mario Kart to have character-exclusive items, like Mario and Luigi using fireballs, the Kongs having giant banana peels, the Koopas getting triple shells, and Wario and Waluigi throwing the bombs. It makes you far more considerate as to what character you bring with you into a race or a battle. The series would start to ease into becoming more accessible from here. The mini turbo drift works nearly exactly the same as how it did in Mario Kart 64, but now you can no longer spin out by running headfirst into a wall or turning too wildly. I know some like the challenge of trying not to spin out, but I think keeping the kart gameplay as tight and experiment-friendly as it could be while maintaining the Mario Kart chaos was a good move. Don't worry, it is still very chaotic though. Blue shells are more common than they ever were on higher difficulties, and now they take away any item you're holding onto. It makes being in first place in this game downright scary because there is absolutely nothing you can do if a blue shell is on the field. Mario Kart DS keeps a lot of the small changes from Double Dash and brings the series into full 3D on a handheld. Of course, we're back to one character per kart, but another important mainstay that it brings from Double Dash that I didn't initially touch on is having multiple unique karts to choose from. It allows for a lot more playstyles depending on the stats you prefer to have while playing. This game also introduces the blooper, which is, for some reason, a mainstay item in the series. It does nothing but make it a little bit harder to see. Thanks, I appreciate it. Mario Kart Wii is what I would like to call the start of modern Mario Kart. This game has the most similarities with future games while having some exclusive quirks. Right when you start playing the game, you'll notice that the drift has been changed a bit, but it's likely for the last time. Instead of rapidly moving the stick or D-pad back and forth while drifting to build up your mini turbo as fast as possible, now the mini turbo builds up to higher tiers over time, and the harder you turn inwards, the faster the turbo will build up. I actually quite like this change, since it's far less hand-pain to deal with depending on the system, but I'd imagine this change is most likely to accommodate for the tilt controls, which most people who played Mario Kart Wii probably used. Now, that certainly does remove a bit of a skill element where you see how many times you can mini-turbo on a single turn, but let's be real. Does this look like it'd be fun to do while drifting? I don't think so. There's also some new items like the Mega Mushroom, and 2 that would never return again. The Thunder Cloud being a disgraceful cloud above your head that shrinks you after enough time passes unless you pass it on to someone else, and the Pow Block, which creates an earthquake for every player ahead of you that can be dodged with good timing, but it makes you drop your items regardless, so screw you. Then they ended up introducing 2 more incredible mainstays. For every ramp on a track, you can now shake the Wii Remote or push a button on the D-pad to perform a trick right as you jump off of it and boost when you stick the landing. This makes chaining jumps off ramps a lot more engaging, even if hitting the D-pad for this is really annoying. But look at me and tell me this isn't fun. It's very fun, no more light air. Then, of course, they added bikes to the mix. Bikes only have 1 tier of mini turbo, but man can these hit corners like a king. Except for the bikes that have you sit upright, those aren't as good. The other unique trait to bikes is that shaking the Wii Remote or pressing a button on the D-pad will allow you to perform a wheelie, which makes you move a little faster at the cost of turn speed and stuns you a bit more when another player bumps into you. This mechanic didn't return in any future games, sadly, but I suppose I can see why, since doing this made bikes far more optimal than karts ever did. Guess they would have needed some serious nerfing. Wink wink nudge nudge. Mario Kart 7 adds a whole new layer to tracks by allowing underwater traversal that comes with floaty physics, and now there are large blue jump ramps that activates a glider on your kart for brief flight sections. You could say that these make airtime go for a little bit too long, but it's honestly quite It's honestly quite scary when you're gliding around and have no items on you, because you will take a very long fall if you get hit by anything in the air. That's a bit more of a risk element. 7 also nerfs the blue shell, where they no longer take your items, but also significantly buffs them by hitting anyone that gets in its path as it travels on the ground again, like in 64 and Super Circuit, and getting hit will make you tumble in a random direction, sometimes even backwards or off of the stage. It's pretty damn devastating. There's also a motion-controlled first-person mode that never comes back. I don't know, I thought it was pretty neat. Mario Kart 8 further expands on the track layers and adds anti-gravity, allowing you to drive all over the walls, ceilings, loops, and even some wacky underwater segments. It even changes the gameplay a little bit too during these segments by generally lowering the gravity to gently glide over gaps, and bumping into opponents and specific objects will give you a little spin turbo. It adds a strange level of cooperation that wasn't there before. This game also quite famously introduces the first item deliberately designed to defend yourself against blue shells, the Super Horn. It blasts mostly anything around you and doesn't make blue shell targets as draining. The only things that can get rid of a Super Horn are lightning strikes and boos. Bikes make their return after being absent from 7, and they come with an expected drawback. The turning isn't as sharp, and you can no longer perform wheelies on command, instead being relegated to a boost animation. This makes karts and bikes far more balanced, especially considering that bikes now have the same drift tier properties as karts now. Speaking of the drift, exclusively to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you can now build up to a 3rd tier of mini turbo with the Purple Sparks. This takes a while to build up to, but the turbo lasts almost as long as the use of a mushroom. Though Purple Sparks are only available if you don't have smart steering on, so make sure you turn that off. The game isn't fun with smart steering anyway. Each new game, even the deluxe port of Mario Kart 8, has done something new to build Mario Kart into what it is, even if it ends up removing some things along the way. It really is startling how differently the first Mario Kart game feels from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The core essence of Mario Kart has always been there and been maintained through each game, but the way you operate through the tracks in Super Mario Kart is an entirely different process than how you'd play any other version of these tracks that exist. Usually, when it comes to a franchise and its sequels, there tends to be a lot of little improvements each sequel makes, but there's a level of consistency in how each game plays. Look at the 2D Mario games, or the 2D Kirby games, or the classic Sonic games, or the classic Mega Man games, or even something like the Dark Souls games. There's a lot of new improvements and additions that each game makes, no matter how large or little, but you play each of these games and their sequels just like how you'd play any other entry. I think the reason we see retro tracks so often in newer Mario Kart games isn't just for the sake of recycling old content to make the game larger, but each Mario Kart plays in a different way than the last one that it almost feels like a brand new experience, especially when they get the chance to add new shortcuts that weren't possible before. It took many changes to get where we are today, but hey, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is pretty freaking awesome. Notice how I said different when referring to the changes each Mario Kart makes. Not improvements or downgrades, not better or worse, different. That word is going to get repetitive the more I say it, and it'll just end up losing my point, so I think it's better if I just explain why I've come to my viewpoint regarding these games. In the midst of all the changes I've mentioned are a number of unique visions for Mario Kart. Remember when I said there are quite a number of people that don't like Mario Kart 8? That's likely because that game is not their ideal Mario Kart experience. For demonstration on a surface level, I believe that there are 3 types of Mario Kart games. These categories represent the general crowds each game is making an attempt to appeal to. Working our way backwards, first we have the modern Mario Kart titles. These 3 games make strives to make the series more accessible for anyone to jump in and have a good time, while having the slight bit of depth there to entice some players that want to play more competitively. Generally, anyone can pick up these games and competently play with any group of people. Next, we have the older Mario Kart games. These generally have a bit more of a skill ceiling that gives pro players a pretty large advantage when playing against most people, but have a large amount of chaos that anyone can still jump in and have fun with, regardless of skill level. Then we have what I call the super games. These 2 are definitely early kart racers with a unique pseudo 3D design that seems dated when looking at them from afar, but not only have a unique charm, but also have an incredible amount of speedrun potential. These 3 categories of games contain the general types of Mario Karts that are ideal to specific people. Some may like the smoother and content-rich gameplay of games like Mario Kart Wii or Mario Kart 8, but others miss the spastic crazy chaos that comes from Mario Kart Double Dash or Mario Kart DS. Then there's a hidden 4th category filled with the other Mario Kart games that are nice little experiments. Now, despite the core gameplay of Mario Kart essentially boiling down to the same idea of racing through courses while sabotaging other racers with items, there is a key mechanic of each game that has changed every few entries that is the primary culprit as to why I have categorized these titles. What is that, you may ask? Drifting. The way Mario Kart handles drifting has surprisingly affected how you play all of these games. Some games have a similar way that drifting works, while others require you to rewire your muscle memory. Let's break down how each category handles drifting. Starting with the super games, which I promise are not in the category of their own just because they have super in the title. Super Mario Kart is the only game in the main Mario Kart series that has no mini turbo. This means that drifting is only used in this game for making tight turns. This surprisingly makes for a unique experience compared to the other games. Where normally you'd be drifting as much as you can to get a bunch of mini turbos, this game makes you be very selective with how you use the drift. There's a number of times where it may not be wise to spend your time winding up a tight drift before you hit the turn. Granted, there's a few times in all of the games where I don't use the drift on specific terms, but it's way more common here, and it adds this weird selective turning strategy that I can't help but appreciate. Mario Kart Super Circuit may still have a mini turbo, but you would still play it very similarly to how you would play Super Mario Kart. So much so that every track from that game was added here as a bonus. Due to the smaller size of these tracks, the amount of turns you'll be making in a shorter time frame is much higher, so there's a lot more consideration as to what turns are worth it to drift on, especially since you can't adjust how strong your drift turns are like in the 3D titles. Nah, in these games, especially Super Circuit, you need to commit to your drift, full stop. You cannot get a mini turbo in Super Circuit unless you are doing a hard corner and successfully drive straight after a clean drift. It's most likely that you'll play these tracks at least once before you even attempt doing competent drifts. It's honestly kind of refreshing to see such a high skill ceiling for these games. On to the older Mario Kart games that have made the transition into full 3D, the drifts in all of these games require a lot of stick or D-pad movement. You may be flinging the analog stick in very strange directions to create a large spark on the mini turbo, but the benefit of this is that the pacing of mini turbos is dependent on the player entirely. If you're fast with charging up drifts, you can pull off so many mini turbos in a single turn that keeps every moment of the gameplay engaging. There's this constant action throughout all three of these games. It makes both racing and time trials really satisfying to get down. Look at this bit of dry desert in Mario Kart Double Dash. The first part of this course challenges you with this swervy road that feels great to nail all of the mini turbos off of, like you're launching through some kind of zigzag. Felt a bit of a similar thing in Mushroom City too. If you take a look right here at the beginning of Delfino Square in Mario Kart DS, you can do a similar thing on this big, wide road, and it feels really good to do. Flicking the analog stick back and forth while racing may not be everyone's thing, but it certainly adds a pretty large layer of skill to these games that makes watching skilled players of the games a real treat. The modern Mario Kart titles drop this approach to make the drift strength primarily length-based, which does remove D-pad blisters, to be fair. This direction is definitely best to get the vast majority of players to understand the drifting mechanics. The mini turbos are stronger in each new game to make up for the new system, but there is still a degree of mastery that is sort of missing from these games. Now, it obviously doesn't ruin the series at all. It works perfectly well, and each game finds new ways to create layers of skill and mastery, but they definitely cater more towards a general audience of players. To get into specifics, Mario Kart Wii actually has 2 modes for drifting. Automatic makes regular turns sharper without a mini turbo, while manual makes you rely on the mini turbo for pretty much every major turn. Mario Kart 7 and 8, in a smart decision, would then fuse these 2 modes together so that way everyone's on an even playing field, and so that way I don't nearly drive off the track into an ocean of lava. The way modern Mario Kart titles handle drifting would really become the kart racing standard for drift mechanics going forward, and for good reason. It's satisfying to do and doesn't require every ounce of your thumb muscles to do. I mean, look at a game like Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, for example. Despite that game using this fairly simple approach to drifting, a lot of the tracks in that game have absolutely bonkers turns that make the entire game investing. I'm not gonna say that the drift is the sole reason that these games are different from one another. I mean, modern Mario Kart has a completely different vibe than the older Mario Karts have. You and your fancy modernized fonts. I miss the days of colorful, blocky Mario fonts. God, I sound old. There's even a bit of a change in the soundtrack direction throughout these games. The older games generally have a bubbly atmosphere that uses different instrumentation to suit a track's vibe, and while that is the case for the modern games as well, they're definitely a lot more high energy, often going into rock territory with electric guitars for a good number of tracks. Although Mario Kart 8 does go into full orchestra points with a smooth saxophone, and God, it's beautiful. However, the point is, the drift goes a long way in making these Mario Kart games play in completely unique ways to each other. Now, even though I have already categorized these Mario Kart games, there is still a deeper level to this. These categories represent the general philosophies of the eras these games released in, but there are plenty of unique traits that every individual game has in this series that makes a lot of these preferable to one another on an individual level. You want to start with the 8-legged beast standing next to me? Mario Kart 8 is the only mainline game in the series to have 200cc, the fastest possible speed that any Mario Kart has run in. I talked about how the modern Mario Karts are generally for everyone to enjoy, but 200cc really reels back in the strategic element that even the Super games had while making everyone move insanely quickly. braking has not been a useful mechanic in Mario Kart for a very long time until this game introduced 200cc. I was blown away when I first experienced 200cc and had to pay attention to how much I needed to brake on specific turns and when. I'm getting this excited over a basic function of a car. This makes Neo Bowser City one of my favorite courses in the game. This track is on a rainy road high above a lot of buildings, and there's some really long and thin turns towards the end that are an absolute death sentence if you're already boosting. 200cc changes how you play Mario Kart 8 so much that there is even a dedicated 200cc category for the time trials, which is absolutely wonderful to have. Stuff like this is more in line with what the fans of the older Mario Karts are looking for. I've seen some people who don't like Mario Kart 8 praise 200cc for being a unique and challenging experience that brought them in on the game again. But then as they're playing that, they remember that this is Mario Kart 8 because this is the only game to feature coins as an item from an item box. Yeah, I can't really defend this one. In Deluxe, you can make things a lot easier for yourself by holding on to a coin and then using it after you've hit an item box to guarantee you won't have another coin. But it's still an obnoxious inclusion that was always an issue on the original Wii U release. Speaking of the Wii U release, Battle Mode. 8 on Wii U is infamous for having the single worst battle mode in the entire series. They committed the calamitous sin of having you battle on the racetracks themselves as opposed to uniquely designed battle maps, and the results are embarrassing. They must have had to rush this game out or something. You cannot tell me this beautiful game has a battle mode this poor as a result of laziness. In fact, the biggest selling point of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was completely replacing the lackluster one on Wii U with the most varied battle mode we've seen to date, including every mode that has ever been in the series alongside a new one in the form of Renegade Roundup, where you play a game of cops and robbers with piranha plants. They absolutely cooked with this one. I would also like to point out that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has the highest track count in the entire series, initially having 48 courses due to bundling the DLC of the Wii U version, but thanks to the Booster Course Pass DLC, that track count has doubled to a whopping 96. Honestly, even if the tracks were made by Mario Kart's B or C team with a lower budget, the amount of content on display is simply incredible for this game. Nearing 100 racetracks is a masterful achievement for a kart racer, and it's easy to see why so many consider Mario Kart 8 Deluxe the definitive Mario Kart game. But that's not gonna stop the hardcore Mario Kart Wii players, baby! Mario Kart Wii has this strange little aura to it that has left a large impact on pop culture. Everyone seems to know what a Coconut Mall is. It used to be the best-selling game in the series, and some of these tracks are so iconic that they saved Mario Kart Wii's Rainbow Road as the final track to be added to the Booster Course Pass, and everyone was completely hyped by it. I think this entry is really able to separate itself from the rest when it comes to the bikes. It is next to impossible to play Mario Kart the same way again after using the bikes in Wii. Using wheelies as constant as you can and making mad corners. Plus, look at these trick chains I'm doing here. This is fun. The lightning clouds suck though, please get rid of it. Oh wait, they did. You wanna know the real deal when it comes to this game though? Do you want to see why this game still gets played online in custom servers? Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the stage from New Funky Mode, give it up for Funky Kong and the Flame Runner! Name a more iconic Mario Kart character / kart combination. This game is absolutely flooded with Funky Kong plus Flame Runner players. He has absurd speed, weight, and inward drift speed, so he is a huge hit with competitive players. Lobbies are an army of these players, and I'm honestly impressed whenever I see competitive gameplay of something that isn't this combo. Not to mention, Mario Kart Wii has a shockingly large modding scene. Custom Track Grand Prix adds a ridiculous amount of tracks to the game made by a whole bunch of different people, ranging from courses from previous games that didn't make it to completely original tracks. I'd also like to mention that someone put Sonic without a cart in the game, and I mean that's just kinda funny. Not as funny as the shenanigans that can happen in Mario Kart 64 though. Cripes on a bicycle. This game is when Mario Kart really started to become completely nuts. Half of the obstacles and items in this game launch you super high into the air, and you can spin out by turning too much or by drifting too hard in a certain direction like in the Super games. There's a track that keeps zero track of your placement in the race at all, and there are tracks that have portions where if you fall off, you then have to redo an entire section of the track and Lakitu refuses to pick you up. It is brutal. I am truly sorry if this is your first Mario Kart game in the year 2025, because it is honestly so punishing when you don't play the game right, and that might be why I love it so much. While we're here, 64 and the Super games handle red shells completely unlike every other Mario Kart game that would come afterwards. Red shells are a homing item that will target the player in front of you, and while future games will have red shells follow along the track path until they reach the player, most of the time in Mario Kart 64, the red shells will target the next player depending on their position on the map. That means if you cannot see the player in front of you, that red shell is likely just gonna careen into a wall. Which means it isn't ideal to use the red shell until the player is directly in your line of sight, which is a balance I actually kind of like in a weird way. I don't know why. I think it's because most of the time in future games you'll just throw the red shell no question, but here it actually makes you think more about whether you should use your red shell as defense and wait until you see the next player, or throw when you see them right in front of you and just guarantee a hit on them. Though I will say my point here comes with a little bit of an asterisk, because for some reason it does act like how it does in future games on some tracks, but it is entirely dependent on what track it is, and it's a bit inconsistent. This game may also have one of the scariest Grand Prix modes in the franchise, because this game has the CPU's rubber band with the power of a slingshot. You could be well and good in the first place, and the people in second and third will creep up behind you faster than you can process what item you have. It isn't even drafting, which was introduced in this game and became a mainstay for the 3D entries. They just blatantly increase in speed and become gods at the game until they catch up to you, where they can become dumb as a rock as a shit again. Maybe this is all why it's satisfying to see speedruns of this game. Of course, speedrunners are able to pull insane exploits on the tracks in this game, but with this game and how punishing it is for those who haven't crossed its skill ceiling, it makes it one of the most satisfying Mario Karts to go through each course with this wonderful flow state, doing it all in one clean sequence without slipping up or falling. I know I'm basically describing what makes the Sonic game fun, but this one kinda hits different with how much stuff you have to consider while playing it. It also has the most unique style out of any game in the series. All of the characters are pre-rendered models that are put into a 3D world, and while it can look a bit dated, especially when playing on a higher resolution screen, I think it has its charm. I've always loved this character select screen with all the characters blinking with an unnecessary amount of frames of animation. Then there's also the fact that a lot of the visual effects have this comic-style text coming up to exaggerate specific actions. Happens when you jump, explode, spin out, even sparks when you drift. It has this weird cartoony style that I haven't seen in any other game in this series, though I think Mario Kart World is going to have some text with certain effects, so that's pretty neat. Jumping ahead a bit, Mario Kart DS was honestly quite ambitious for the system, wasn't it? Seeing fully 3D games on the DS that run at 60 frames per second is such a satisfying sight to see. This game managed to add more than double the amount of content that 64 and Double Dash had, and managed to create what is probably the most engaging amount of single-player Mario Kart content in any game of the series so far. There's an entire mission mode in this one with challenges across race courses, battle maps, and even including boss fights, which were such a cool idea for Mario Kart. I honestly wish we'd see something like this again in the series aside from those limited time online missions in Mario Kart Wii, though I think Free Roam in Mario Kart World is adding some similar challenges to that. But enough talking about how good Mario Kart DS is. While this was the hit DS multiplayer game at the time it came out in, there is one thing that my brain associates with this game nowadays. See, this is an older Mario Kart game, meaning the drift functions how it does in 64 and Double Dash. However, this game sort of does this weird thing with the mini turbo where you're kinda slippery once you perform a mini turbo, and because of this, you're able to do the most devilish thing. Mario Kart DS is seeping out of every corner with a technique called snaking. Basically, on any straight road that is even somewhat wide, you can get away with drifting left and right constantly to get a consistent streak of boosts. It is possible to snake on occasion in other Mario Kart games to mixed results, but it is so easy to do in this game thanks to the slipperiness of the turbo that basically anyone that even slightly knows how to use the technique will use it like a madman to completely dominate races. You either love it or you hate it. I don't completely mind it, but I gotta admit, this D-pad blister wasn't here yesterday. Thankfully, Mario Kart DS is more than playable without abusing this technique, but when it comes down to the guy that is snaking versus the guy that is not snaking, that slithery bastard's gonna win. Then we have Peak Fiction, Double Dash. Surprisingly, this one is a little bit more divided in terms of reception nowadays. I used to say it was my personal favorite, but I think more than any other Mario Kart, I played this game for a completely separate reason than the rest of the series. For one, this game has simultaneously the stiffest yet most slippery controls out of all the 3D games. It is so hard to describe how this game feels to control. It's like making small adjustments feels tight, but making large swerves around obstacles feels like you're on ice more than the stage where you're literally on ice. Okay, maybe it isn't that jarring and it isn't super hard to get a hang of like with Mario Kart 64, and doing time trials is honestly a blast since I think this style of drifting works best in this game due to how amazing this game feels to play on a GameCube controller. But undoubtedly the most standout thing is how this game handles item management in a completely unique way. Of course, this is primarily due to the double character mechanic. Having two characters on a cart does wonders with the possibility of switching the items you use. It adds a whole new level of strategy, being able to get an item, not finding much use for it, and saving it later by sending that item to the driver's seat. Then, as I mentioned before, there's of course the character-specific items, which makes this game have the largest reason for picking different characters. Though here's something that I would argue creates a layer of tension that no other Mario Kart game has. In every other Mario Kart game aside from Super Mario Kart, once you get an offensive item like a banana, shell, or even a bomb, you can hold the item button to keep that item behind you to protect yourself from an incoming item, giving most items layers of offense and defense. Though maybe I wouldn't recommend using a bomb as a shield unless if you're a gamer god like me. Double Dash makes the bold decision to remove this function. You can still throw items in front of you or behind you, but in order to use items defensively in this game, you'll have to actually time when you throw your banana or shell. To help this approach, this game introduced having a warning sign on your screen whenever you're being targeted by a red shell or any other homing item. Honestly, as crazy as it sounds, I'm kinda here for it. I'm okay with how future games handle items, no doubt, but I really respect the approach of having to time when to toss the item backwards to defend yourself. I would say that this and the item switching mechanic makes this game have the most strategic layers to item usage out of all the Mario Kart games. I see a lot of players beg for Mario Kart to bring a mode back that lets you use two players, and I didn't really get why at first, but now I totally get it. Doubt it'll ever happen, but I love how this game completely changes how you think how to use items, and I think that's why this is one of my favorite Mario Karts to this day. So where does that leave the Super games? Super Mario Kart, and in turn Mario Kart Super Circuit, are the top culprits of having the most dated Mario Kart elements. I will say that Super Mario Kart is the game I'm least likely to revisit. I'm not all into this two-screen approach personally, but this game still 100% has its charm. I've already touched on how a lack of mini turbo changes how you play this game, but there's some items that are mostly exclusive to this game that are fascinating. First, there's a mini mushroom, which makes anyone who touches it smaller. Ooh, scary. But most significant is the Super Feather, which lets you perform a high jump that gives the game quite a lot of shortcut potential. It's funny how we didn't see this item again until Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Battle Mode and its full return in Mario Kart World, where the shortcut potential is going to be astronomical. The Super games and Mario Kart 64 also handle the Grand Prix a little differently. If you place 5th or lower, you actually have to restart the race to get into a position where you can at least secure points. In the Super games, you actually have a limited number of retries, and if you run out, you have to do the entire cup again. I'd argue that this actually makes Grand Prix easier, since you can just retry a race to see if you can place higher next time and save a run of a certain cup. Though the AI still kicked my ass in Super Mario Kart, we're not going to talk about that. It isn't a better or worse approach, but I can see why they decided to change this system in Double Dash.
Double Dash, excuse me?
I think Mario Kart Super Circuit is the game I actually came to have a sudden appreciation for. This game already has quite a bit of a learning curve when it comes to figuring out how stuff like the drift works, but when you find out how this game's physics work, oh my god, this game opens up. The shortcut potential for Super Circuit can, actually be insane. Now, I still suck at this game, no denying that, but I seriously must commend the level of insane speedrun potential that they intentionally crammed into this game. See, the game is fairly typical in terms of Mario Kart on any stage that has no jump pads, but the second they throw in multiple boost panels and jump pads, this is where the flat track design suddenly becomes my favorite thing about Super Circuit. Here is Lakeside Park, a stage with volcanic eruptions and devious jump pads on sharp turns that send you way further back in the course. This track is pretty darn difficult at first glance, but while playing, I noticed something. There are jump pads that give you some air time to jump over gaps, while others will try to mess you up. But then I noticed this jump pad, completely isolated from the rest of the track in a place that is seemingly impossible to get to. Then I remembered how jump pads let you go over walls, and I saw these boost panels right before the first big jump of the stage. One thing about Super Circuit is that the faster you go due to boost, the higher you'll jump off of a jump pad. And then, it clicked. This isn't an isolated jump pad for no reason. No freaking way. I skipped this big ass chunk of the track by abusing multiple boosts and perfect positioning. Well, it'd simply be rude of me not to go back to another track to see what I've been missing out on. Cheese Land. Cheese Land. This course has 2 big jumps over a linear portion of the track you drove across earlier. In the midst of this is a giant jump pad that is completely blocked off by walls. Well, it's clearly possible to get here. It's pretty easy to reach with the second jump pad, and it lets you skip a small chunk of the track. Pretty cool. But this first jump pad is wide and large, so after trying over and over again, I wanted to try something. You can hit both of these boost pads with a mushroom and do a massive turn to the side to reach that jump pad that is way further in the track. Incredible. I am shocked by how much advantage they took of the flat track design with this one to make tracks with absolutely absurd shortcut potential. Super Circuit tends to be one of the less favorable Mario Karts due to how similar it is to Super Mario Kart. But honestly, I think this game has one of the largest skill ceilings in the whole series. In my eyes, the epitome of Riz is showing someone how good you are at Mario Kart Super Circuit. They'll fall for you instantly. I mean, the Rainbow Road of this game mostly has jump pads wrapped around the entire track, which lets you completely massacre some of the portions of this track with where you can jump. It's super cool. This game has far more of a unique direction than Super Mario Kart does, and I'd honestly recommend giving it a shot for yourself if you weren't feeling it at first. I think there's something great in this game that can be a little hard to see. Oh yeah, then there's Mario Kart 7. Now I actually have quite a soft spot for this game. I have a lot of fond memories playing this with my family as a kid during holiday vacation. This game introduced some really cool staples for the series. Gliding, underwater driving, customizable karts, the Super Leaf, sure. This game was great when it came out, and I still love it today, but the vast majority of this game's DNA was carried over to Mario Kart 8 and even Mario Kart Tour. I will say that this game also got a really good custom track Grand Prix by the community that warrants giving this game a revisit, but aside from a few tracks like the Woohoo Island tracks, and I guess this game's Bowser's Castle not making a return, there's not a whole lot of reasons to play this game over Mario Kart 8. I mean, I don't see myself coming back to this game for the Super Leaf or the Honey Queen, but despite how this game clearly walked so Mario Kart 8 could run, I could still see how this could be someone's favorite Mario Kart game. It has the gliding and the water driving that makes tracks a lot more dynamic. It's one of the 3 Mario Kart games to be really stingy with the Grand Prix rankings, where you have to basically drive really well and not drop to second place after lap 2 to get all 3 stars in a cup. It has the best Rainbow Road in the entire series with this magical 1-lap journey through space across planets. 1-lap courses in general are absolutely incredible in this game, and most importantly, coins are not items in this game, unlike in Mario Kart 8. I can see why this game was bundled with the vast majority of 3DS systems. With that overview of each game being done, every Mario Kart has their own little quirk or strat that can easily make any of them a favorite. Even Super Mario Kart if you like old school arcadey kart racers. Before we conclude things, I'd like to mention that Mario Kart is one of the only massive multiplayer Nintendo series that we frequently see get re-released through stuff like Virtual Console and Nintendo Classics. I think that there's actually a pretty large reason as to why we see Super Mario Kart, Mario Kart 64, Mario Kart Super Circuit, and Mario Kart 8 all playable on the same system, and why we don't see another multiplayer juggernaut being Super Smash Bros. Get many re-releases aside from Smash 64 on the Wii Virtual Console. While Super Smash Bros. Does have some balancing, content, and tech exclusive to each game, Smash is a series that typically improves on each new entry, making tweaks to enhance the gameplay that makes the previous game nearly obsolete, except for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, where they blatantly wanted to make that more of a party game. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has every single thing that a Smash game possibly needs in this day and age. Aside from a satisfying single player. Why would you want to go back to Smash for Wii U? For crazy orders? I don't know. Mario Kart as a series doesn't really take that direction. Each new game has changes, like how the mechanics work, how the battle mode rules are, and what characters are introduced or removed. But every Mario Kart is going in a new theme and direction that makes them stand on their own legs. The battle mode in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe may have a stellar cast of maps in every mode from the series, but I see plenty of people still adore Mario Kart 64's battle mode due to the intense atmosphere of the elimination rules that never made a return in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But hey, at least one thing that's consistent is that at least every Mario Kart after Mario Kart 7 has the B-Dasher in it. Now I'm stating a bit of the obvious here, but Mario Kart truly is a phenomenon and is one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time. It is rare to find someone that doesn't like Mario Kart on at least some level. The series is more accessible than it ever has been to the world. There were numerous Mario Kart games released for the arcades that deserve an entire other video's worth of discussion on how differently they played to the mainline games and how they're a giant Namco crossover. There was even a VR one. I want to see that come to consoles. There's a Mario Kart game that is free to play on your smartphone that has a lot of microtransactions, but is able to capture the Mario Kart essence in its own little way. There's that Mario Kart ride that is a on-rail shooter, basically, at Super Nintendo World. Then there's Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, which is a game that takes place in your house on an RC car, but it's a cool experiment that has led to some really cool creations. I wish this kept going, honestly. Okay, this is slightly off topic, but I don't know when I'm ever going to talk about this again. Something I found amazing back when Mario Kart Live Home Circuit first came out is that a company called Surrogate TV, which is a company that let you play real-life games like robots and toys over the internet, set up this big-ass Mario Kart course over at their arcade. Then, using their site, you could then play this game online with other people at this location over the internet. My mind was absolutely blown. Yeah, there was a good amount of input delay, but this is happening in real life. I got my friends in on this and we were able to have such a fun time while it was around. I don't know what happened to Surrogate TV, but this whole thing got shut down a long time ago. I hope they're doing okay. They probably got struck down by Nintendo. Anyways, back on topic. What inspired me to make this video about the differences of each Mario Kart game is when I recently had a hangout with some college friends at my house. I suggested the idea of playing Mario Kart, so most of us gravitated towards Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. One of my friends, however, wasn't all that interested in playing with us. I didn't want to leave him out, so I let my other two friends play Mario Kart 8 themselves so they could get that sweet 60 FPS split screen experience that isn't there with 3 to 4 players. So then to the friend that didn't want to play, I pitched the idea of playing Mario Kart Double Dash on the GameCube, in which he did want to play. I found that really interesting. There's something about Mario Kart Double Dash and Mario Kart DS that hits for him where Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is arguably seen as the definitive Mario Kart, doesn't hit for him. The older Mario Karts are a lot more technical and action-packed when it comes to the core kart gameplay with pure item chaos that the modern games have balanced and streamlined. But hey, the series wouldn't be where it is without those tweaks. I love every single one of these games, all for their own special reasons. I'm more than happy to play any of these games with anyone at any event. They all carry their own tracks and mechanics that make me love them for their own reasons. Maybe with the exception of Super Mario Kart, but I can acknowledge where that game succeeds too. I find it really interesting that Mario Kart World seems to be dropping some of the stuff that Mario Kart 8 brought to the table, like anti-gravity, in favor of adding mechanics that add a new layer of skill that we haven't seen in this series in a very long time. It's going to have less tracks than Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but those tracks are going to be special in a way that make me want to go to it over Mario Kart 8, and vice versa. There is a Mario Kart for everyone. Whether you're into older kart racers, want a game with a large skill ceiling, a lot of creative challenges, or if you just want to have some fun.